In this presentation, we are going to discuss Za, a polyphonic group lament from Svaneti in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. This part of the funeral ritual is very special in that it is believed to provide a window into one of the early performance practices of traditional Georgian vocal music. During the summer months of 2016, we had the chance to perform an ethnomusicological field expedition to Georgia, which you see here in its geographical context. Our overall goal was to document the current state of traditional multi-voice singing in Upper Svaneti, a mountainous region in the northwest of the country. During the 3 months of our field work, we were able to obtain a new corpus of roughly 250 sets of different recordings of folk songs, religious hymns, funeral songs, prayers, and lamenting in Upper Svaneti, but also in the so-called Svan eco-villages distributed over the country. A particular gem in this corpus are recordings of laments which cover all vocal funeral mourning forms that are universal. This includes, on the one hand, solo and the responsorial keening or wailing of women and men, which is a spontaneous and improvised manifestation of pain, as demonstrated in the recording we made at a funeral in Latli, 2016. On the other hand, Svaneti, as well as some other parts of Georgia, has a special three-voice dirge, which, as far as we know, is a unique tradition to Georgia and has no analog anywhere else. We mean three-voice folk funeral chanting, highly organized and coordinated within the men's group. Zar is still a living tradition in Svaneti, and we were able to record some of its variants at actual funerals. We will now listen to the beginning of the Latli. In the present study, we decided to approach the analysis from two different perspectives, combining tools from computational ethnomusicology and from classical music. The computational method was used to examine the acoustical properties of the dirge. On the other hand, via classical musicological analysis, we addressed the perceptual aspect of the chant, dealing with the compositional structure and the function of the musical components within the composition. Our overall goal is to understand the musical grammar of Zar. Our results led us to two main findings, one of which relates to the long-standing discussion about the genesis of Georgian music. The second one concerns the structural model of Zar, which we analyze from two different perspectives, an acoustical and a musicological one. Most interesting in this context is that we find a clear relationship of the structural properties of the individual Zar variants and their geographical location. Frank will now take over to discuss the acoustical analysis of our field record.
Regarding the recording setup, our expedition was very special because in addition to the high-quality DPA headset microphones, one for each voice group, we used larynx microphones to capture voices of the individual singers undistorted by the fellow singer. Furthermore, we employed stereo microphones and a 4K video camera, including a directional microphone, all of which were subsequently synchronized. This makes these recordings uniquely suited for computational analysis, in particular because all the recordings, video and audio, can be accessed conveniently through a web-based interface hosted at the University of Alberta. The use of larynx microphones has a huge benefit for the musicological analysis in that a number of diagnostic tools can easily be derived from the original recordings using well-tested algorithms for monophonic analysis. These are, for example, the fundamental frequency trajectories, which show the sung melodies, the note trajectories, in which some of the intonation artifacts are already removed, or what we find the most convenient tool, the harmonic mellograph, which combines a melodic and a harmonic perspective. The principle behind the generation of a harmonic mellograph is quite simple. Here it's illustrated for the middle and top voice. First, we select a matching note pair in the top and middle voice. Here we take the first one in the polyphonic. Subsequently, we measure the harmonic interval size, which in this case is 700 cents. Next, the corresponding color code for this interval size has to be determined from the chosen color scale. And finally, the space between the two notes has to be painted according to this color. This procedure is then repeated for the other intervals until the whole song has been processed. The procedure for the middle and the bass voice is essentially the same. For the interval between the bass and the top voice, however, there is a small problem because the space between these voices is already used up to color code the middle to top voice and the bass to middle voice intervals. A simple solution in this case is to paint the interval below the bass voice as a vertical image. The important message to take away in this context is that the harmonic mellograph shows the melodic and the harmonic information content of a three-voice song in a single plot. Here you see the harmonic mellograph plots for all the 11 SARE recordings from our corpus. One important aspect which can immediately be seen from this figure is that the intervals between bass and top voice, indicated by the vertical bars hanging below the bass voice melody, are dominated by the bluish color representing 700 cents, corresponding to a fifth. In other words, most of the times, bass and top voice move in parallel fifths. All 11 recordings belong to 5 different variants. These are shown here in such a way that the top we have short duration, small ambitus, and a fairly simple structure, which then changes to longer durations, larger ambitus, and more complex structures at the bottom. In other words, according to the increasing elaboration of the acoustical structure. This, of course, immediately triggers the question if the acoustic character of a SARE is related in a systematic way to any contextual aspect of the funeral ritual, for example, to the geographical location. In the upper right panel, we see the recording locations in red circles and the locations of the different SARE variants in black stars plotted on a geographical map. The region is very mountainous, as you can see in the overview in the upper left panel. Mount Elbrus, with 5,642 meters, which you can see in the upper left, is the highest mountain in the whole Caucasus Mountain. As you can see here, the origins of the different SARE variants, shown by the red circles, are all in or very close to the Inguri River, shown here by the blue line. If we line them up according to the course of the river, we can see that all the acoustical properties systematically change along the course of the river. This strongly correlates with the exposure of the settlements to non-Swan influence. At this point, we need to put in a word of warning. Before we get too impressed by what acoustical analysis can reveal, we have to remind ourselves that acoustical analysis cannot automatically give meaning to the feature it detects, at least not yet. This is where the human perceptual analysis has to come to the rescue. Here I hand over to Nana again, who will discuss the perceptual analysis.
The way we perform the perceptual analysis is sketched in the highlighted right panel of this slide. I started my listening to the recordings very extensively, trying to absorb the musical tissue as a musician and trying to recognize phrases and their inner structure. Subsequently, I transcribed what I perceived into a digital Western score. What was important in this context is that in this process, I automatically corrected for the significant continuous pitch rise present in some of the performances. Based on these transcriptions, I performed the structural analysis. What is absolutely crucial in this context is to detect the tonal center and how it changes in the course of the chant, because phrases and microphrases are built around them. Furthermore, I try to identify and mark all the cadences, bridges, and jumps. Subsequently, harmonic melographs were calculated from the scores and annotated with all the identified structural elements. It takes a little bit of training, but the classical score and the harmonic melograph contain more or less the same information. Both represent the melodies, including the note durations of the individual voices, as you can see here for the beginning of the Ushguliza. The blue lines in the harmonic melograph show the middle voice within the monophonic introduction, followed by the three-part body with the red top voice and the black bass voice. The harmonic melograph has the advantage that one can also immediately see the harmonic relation between the individual voices. What you see here is the result of this kind of analysis for the Gal-Ushgul variant. There are two basic compositional principles which are used in the constructing of the zar: repetition and elaboration. The squares indicate the individual phrases, while the acronyms CT and BR refer to cadences and bridges, respectively. The acronym TC refers to the tonal center, which shifts in the course of the zar up and down, as can be seen in the following animation. Here we see how the basic compositional structure is further developed in the more elaborated Latin. In addition to the repetition, we get also new phrases and a coda. What we can also see is that the complexity of the interphrasal structure as well as the ambitus is increased in comparison to the Kal Ushgul. To sum up, we believe that the Kal-Ushgul variant represents an embryonic model of the Zar musical grammar, which is developed downstream of the Enguri River to more sophisticated variants. This can be explained by the increased exposure of the downstream settlements to other musical dialects. One of the results of our study, which we consider important, is related to the long-standing debate on the genesis of Svan, Western Georgia, polyphony. There are two different lines of thought on this topic, the first of which is related to the evolutionary development of monophony into three-part polyphony. This theory is discussed in two models. The first one we refer to as the interval fourth model goes back to Aslanishvili. Its basic principle is sketched in the following animation. In the fourth model, the first voice is assumed to be the middle voice, to which a second voice is added, a fourth below. The voice added as third voice here is the top voice, which is located a fifth above the bass voice. Most Georgian musicologists also share that model. We would call the second model the fifth model as proposed by Gogotishvili. In the fifth model, the first voice is assumed to be the top voice, to which a second voice is added a fifth below. The voice added as a third voice here is the middle voice, which is located a fourth above the bass voice. In contrast to the evolutionary models, von Ficker and more recently Jordania have suggested that polyphony can be ontogenic. Von Ficker has argued that polyphonic sounds are an indispensable part of any natural soundscape and therefore should be considered as a primary sound form. Jordania has suggested that group singing was part of the original pre-human communication with great advantage for survival. As for Zar, the results of our analysis cannot be explained by any of the evolutionary theories in which a melodic voice is supplemented by additional voices to create a vertical structure. In fact, the results of our analysis show that there is no real leading melody which can be harmonized, except for the middle voice in the monophonic introductory. To demonstrate this, we listen to the middle voice of Mesdia variant from the larynx microphone. In addition, the middle voice shows a highly variable melodic behavior within the harmonic fifth frame, as demonstrated by the following animation on the example of Gal Ushguli. Regarding the fourth model, there is a very simple argument against it. As can be seen in the harmonic melograph of the Galushkul variant, the harmonic fourth starts at about 20 seconds within the dirge, while the harmonic framework of parallel fifths between the bass and the top voices is established immediately at the beginning of the polyphonic. In addition, the interval fourth seems to have semantic meaning to intensify the expression of pain and grief. In Zar, it comes with the interjection of Y, which is specific to the funeral. Finally, as a crucial argument against both evolutionary models, the tonal center around which the whole musical structure is built on is maintained by the bass voice, which is actually ruled out by both evolutionary models as a primary voice. To conclude, as to the structure of Zar, we found that characteristic for all variants and all performances of Zar in our corpus is a strong harmonic framework of parallel fifths between the bass and top voice. In Zar, the fourth seems to have semantic meaning to intensify the mourning expression. Interestingly, the acoustic and compositional structures of the different Zar variants are closely related to the geographical locations of their origin along the Enguri River. We believe that the systematically increasing complexity of the different Zar variants in downstream direction reflects the increasing exposure to non-Svan musical influences. With respect to the origin of Zar, we believe that all the results of our analysis rule out the evolutionary models. This makes us believe that Swan three-voice repertoire, at least on the example of its presumably oldest living tradition, related to the concept of death and pain of loss, is very likely ontogenic. Finally, we would like to speculate about the strong presence of fifths and fourths in Zar. Fifths and fourths together seem to embody the simultaneous realization of overtone frequencies as a physical property of nature, as an original sound form in the sense of Ficke, or in the words of Reck, in that the pure relationships of overtone sequences are reflected in the harmony all over the world. In that sense, we believe that Svanzar is a vivid demonstration of how the natural law manifests itself in the musical thinking of.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.